So we'll begin with our normal prayer for teacher and student. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astuma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one nourish us, may that one protect us, may we work together with great energy. May our studies be illumined, may we not unnecessarily argue with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Well, I'm going to start off unusually with asking if there are any questions. I know we don't have this as a question and answer session, but in the light of what I was just discussing, it's something that we can do, and then we'll deal with that. Now, that means I've probably caught you in a mood of something like a rabbit being caught in the headlights and a panic taking place. But nevertheless, I'm happy to take questions.
Based on the meditation,
yes.
I was wondering if the meditation is over on the different things over the spine. So do we meditate in the between the eyebrows here, or do we meditate on the back side?
Okay, so you see, if we take Patanjali seriously as the author really of the process of meditation, we find it covers the whole span of meditation, and he gives us various subjects. Now, you can meditate anywhere, but in the Upanishads, it is always mentioned that we should meditate on the self of the size of a thumb in the heart. And what that means is that the heart is not the physical heart. The heart is, okay, there's the core of your being. And the Taittiriya Upanishad will give us a beautiful scene. It'll show us that there are various layers. They call them sheaths. The Taittiriya Upanishad will start with, very methodically, what is the outer one? Well, the outer one is made from whatever we ate yesterday. Whatever it was, yesterday's bananas and milk, comes out as this body now. And then that is energized. So there is something that is of the same form and distributed fivefold. And this is energy, what we might call the morphological body, if you will. And then inside that, we can imagine like Russian dolls, So inside that will be what we call the mind. That is every mental activity you can think of, except the estimating and executing faculty, which we call buddhi or intellect. So there's a scale of order of subtlety, but also immensity, increasing immensity, and increasingly truthfulness. Let's stop there. So you can imagine a light. This is the example I often use. And so the light bulb is there, and you decide to put an orange covering on it, or a red covering, and then an orange covering, and then some other color, like that. Layer after layer. Now, after the first covering, somebody comes into your room and doesn't know that there's a covering, and to that person's eyesight, it looks as if the whole room is bathed in red because you have a red filter on, a red covering on. And the assumption is it's a red lamp. How did you get such a beautiful red lamp? See. And then the next layer will be something else, orange, and so it goes on. Layer after layer after layer. And with each layer, the original lamp becomes duller. But it's still lending its light to all the other filters. And when we take each one off one at a time, then we come to the original light, which is standing there. So this is the process. It's also the introspective process that we call meditation, where we go inward in a subtle way. Now we can go inward, we can go upward. There's no rule about it. And so Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras gives us a whole variety of things for ending up in anything that appeals to you. any subject that appeals to you. So we don't have any rule like this. But what we're saying is that generally speaking, the idea of going inwards so that no layers are left to where the actual light is in the example, that process, that whole way of proceeding, this is the normal way of meditation. And we can view this innermost point as the heart, metaphorically speaking, the heart. Because we know that when the heart stops, the whole thing stops. So there was an understanding that there was an understanding, something like many, many nerves, as it were, emanating from this thing called the heart. And we still use this phrase today, the heart of the matter and so on. So going in and meditating there. Now, if you are meditating on the impersonal, that kind of non-dualistic meditation, then it's recommended that you meditate on the point between the eyebrows. Well, with the object of your meditation, you'll have to have some form, but it'll be some representation like the ocean or the sky or something like that. And then you get to something more subtle until you find that you are the witness which is there. That's that kind of meditation, falling into objective meditation, subjective meditation, external, internal, like that, in these various ways. So if you are to take any subject, going up a mountain or using Merudanda, the spine, as your mountain, where you go upwards, as it were, this is the yogic understanding, using yogic symbolism, seeing that every center is as a level of consciousness, a layer of consciousness. So you can choose to visualize going inward, and we did both in the meditation. Or you can choose to go upward, and you can imagine now with yogic visualization and creativity, this represented as beautiful lotuses. Not that there are actual lotuses there, by the way. It's not that you have a whole garden in your spine. So all the energy is taken in and progressively. This is another kind of meditation. But you can choose any subject for meditation and you should vary it. The whole idea about meditation is to go from the outside to the inside progressively in progressive steps, like climbing a ladder or taking an inward journey, taking a particular theme and using it. Now, if every single thing in the universe, if every object in the universe is ultimately a manifestation of one thing, then there's no distractions in meditation. You can take anything that comes to the mind, even something that's disturbing it, and use it as a theme. And I often use that example. A great devotee in Zimbabwe, I cannot meditate. They lived out in the country in ideal circumstances, overlooking the Mutoko Hills, the stunning sunsets. And she was an architect and happened to have designed a house and designed an external shrine, something like a cave, and beautiful. I can't meditate, she said. Well, why not? You're there in pristine conditions, all by yourself, no noise, in the beautiful scenic mountains and so on and so forth. You can't meditate? Tell me what your process is. Well, in the early morning, I go to the shrine, 5 o'clock. It's still warm in Zimbabwe at that time. Fine. Then what? Then I sit down. So far, so good. Then what do you do? I light an incense stick. I put a flower there. All good. Then I sit. Wonderful. So far, so good. Found nothing wrong with this. Then as I close my eyes, I hear tuck, 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 tuck. It's the sound of the borehole has just started. Even in the remote area, something will be seen as a disturbance, particularly if you have a critical and correcting mind. You'll want to say, well, let that noise not be there. But the other way of looking at it is take that and use it, because what is necessary to hear that sound? First of all, two things have to hit each other. Originally, in the original manifestation of combinations that we call subtle waves, something had to hit something. Prana had to hit akasha in the yogic language. So energy had to hit potential matter. and potential matter is also energy in subtle form. The two things have to hit. If you want to see how does the universe work, hydrogen has to be there with electrical charge, and gravity has to be there and impinge on it, and make it fall in, and various other molecules fall in. They become so condensed, they start hitting each other, and then you now create whole clouds of hydrogen, which now, because of their interactivity, the molecules interacting with each other and bumping into each other, as it were, generate some level of radiation or heat. Electrons are thrown off. And when these electrons is thrown off, this electrical energy is there, electrical charge, a plasma universe, then things start liquefying, as it were, going into a flux, and then start solidifying. This is the process. Never mind about Big Bang, nobody was there to witness it. We'll leave that out. Since there's no observational evidence for a Big Bang or creation, we'll leave that part out. Two things have to hit each other in order to make a manifestation. So this anahata, this lack of two things hitting, this is really a part and parcel of this meditation, where sound is generated. Any sound is generated and has to be carried through an electromagnetic wave system, invisible to us, but all permitting. And then it arrives at the ear at a certain frequency and makes the tympanum vibrate, the calcium carbonate in your ear. And then when that vibrates and impinges, it goes through a neural network, and the brain recognizes, it's a sound, and this is its identification, because it's within my range of pitch and frequency and all this for me to understand it. But there are sounds I don't understand also. They're beyond my range. So when you hear something, don't take it as a disturbance. Take it as an avenue, a canalization, a pathway, a journey to go inward, because when you're going inward to the electromagnetic system that we call Akasha and prana that acts on it, the next step is, where is it coming from? It's coming from one mind. Now, the subject of this evening is like that. It's revaluation. And I often tell a story that I'm not tired of telling. I told it yesterday at the gathering. I'll tell it again. It's a kind of poem that is used by students to summarize into some kind of précis form, a few sentences of prose or something like that. It's something like a funny story, but it has an application for spiritual life. So there was a rich man who converted all his wealth into 19 elephants. And as we know, those who know some bit of mathematics, 19 is indivisible. It's like 11 is indivisible evenly. You can't do it. And so 19 has no factors, 13, 11 has no factors. Anyway, he has 3 sons. And while he's alive, he registers a will. And in that will, he says, I'm leaving all my wealth in the form of elephants. Curious thing. Now, he's a wise man, but he decided to invest not in money and distribute his money on his death, but elephants. And so eventually he certainly died. And he wanted his first son to get half of the elephants, 19 elephants being there. And his other son, he wanted to get 1/4 of the elephants, and the other son 1/5 of the elephants. And so before they managed to even think about this, the funeral ceremonies were conducted, and they did all the necessary obsequies, and then they worked on how to make any sense of this will. And don't forget, you see, half of 19, well, 9.5 elephants, what use is 9 elephants and a carcass? And they didn't have the equipment to cut it in half, and they never saw the sense of it. What is the use of such a thing? And so each one would have gotten a fraction of an elephant, made out of carcass, And so they were puzzling, what use is this? And so the father, being a rich man, they thought, well, he should probably have put all his investment into wealth, but he didn't. And they were puzzling over all this. And as they were doing that, the king's minister came along on his elephant and saw the dilemma, and he knew the mathematics of it. So he said, okay, well, 19 is the way he looked at it. 19 is 20 minus 1. You can look at it that way. We don't have to look at it as 19. We can revalue it in a different way. He said, look, I tell you what, I'm going to lend you an elephant. Now you have 20. You make your division. Your son took his 10 elephants, and the next son took his 5 elephants. You know, and the next son took his elephants. That made a total of 19 elephants. One took 5, one took 4, one took 10. You now have 19 elephants. And he said, please, if you don't mind, give me the other elephant, the extra elephant, back to me. And they were astonished. They thought it was some kind of miracle. So what is the spiritual value of such a story? You see, in Vedanta, we have what we might call, if you like, 20th elephants all the time. And what that means is that when a doubt comes, we don't answer a questioner. You know, in all these meetings, I asked, do you have a question? Now, in the ancient days, the teachers didn't, they would encourage questions, but they would not have been ready. And why is that? Because you see, somehow, if there's some kind of difficulty or problem in life, instead of charging through it or getting depressed, instead of reacting in a negative way, we can step back a little bit. Now, in one of the talks I had, I mentioned Aristotle's logic, Aristotle's system of morality. And what he did was, he said, you see, there's an extreme version of vice, an extreme version of virtue, and real morality is actually somewhere in between. Real virtue is neither extreme. So I gave an example, I'll give it again. Supposing a man is being attacked in the street, and impulsively I decide I'm going to do something courageous, and I dive in, like somebody playing rugby, you know. And then I didn't know. Let's put the scene in New York or some other place. A man has a gun and we both get shot, and he runs away and he robs us both, and that would not be good for either of us. Not to mention the karma of the robber. Now, probably it would be better to see this man has a gun. If I go in, maybe instead of one victim, there'll be 2. Perhaps I should just withdraw a little bit, find a policeman or something, and let him handle it in a proper way. Or I could understand, well, this man, I can overpower this man, I'm quite convinced of that, then I'll go and do it. But in any event, I've evaluated it. I've stepped back and counted the proverbial 10 and not been impulsive. And I've assessed what will be the best thing to do in the situation. What will be the best moral position for everyone. So when we talk about revaluing, it means we have to step back a little bit. And this is always good in practical life. So when a student has got a doubt, he goes to a teacher, he has before him this dilemma, let us put it in the language of 19 problems or 19 elephants. And he then shuffles around a number of ideas in the subconscious mind. And from his stock, which can be studied from maybe books or discussions with the teacher or some senior man, something like that, and from his own original thinking. When he's doing something, the mind is not particularly occupied, brushing the teeth, for example, or walking, or something of that nature, he has the opportunity then to take the idle mind and then shuffle a few ideas around, and he can call up any number of elephants, extra elephants. There's a hidden wealth in the subconscious mind with memories and impressions, which is not your mind at all. So we have to get used to one revaluation. There's no such thing as my personal mind. That's the first lesson. I have no personal mind. My so-called personal mind is really just a small area projecting out of the cosmic mind. And the entire cosmic mind, therefore, is available for me to produce as many 20th elephants as I can manage. And one can come, it doesn't fit. Another can come, it doesn't fit. Third one can come, maybe it does fit. In any event, one of them will fit. There are inexhaustible opportunities. But we don't normally think of things in this way, so we have to re-register and revalue the mind itself. It's not our personal property. It's just this small area that we're trying to deal with, but much more would come from the cosmic mind. According to the necessity, we can stand at the right time at the right place, allow a flow to come through, make the personality a kind of sensitive instrument, where when the challenge comes from the outside, the reaction will be from the subconscious mind, which really is what we technically call cosmic mind. There's a word for it. Hiranya Garbha. Garbha, a womb, something from which something comes, and it's golden. It's the most beautiful, beautiful cosmic mind, and theology can call this a personal God. But instead of thinking there's a personal God separate to me who will solve all my problems and I have to go with the begging bowl, I can understand, no, wait, there is a single mind, like a single broadcasting station. Now you see, if you understand that, some questions will go away and be solved by themselves. Where do I go to after death is a meaningless question. Supposing we are listening to a broadcast, and here my favorite example is a broadcasting station, let us call it, I know in Ireland they say RTE, okay? So the RTE is broadcasting. For those who are not familiar with Ireland, we can say it as RTE, something like that. But anyway, RTE it is, and it's broadcasting. And to catch it, a simultaneous broadcast, I have to catch the same wavelength, which means I have to tune my transistor. But my transistor is a localized projection of the cosmic mind. And when this body dies, let us say, and the transistor goes, what becomes of the broadcast is a meaningless question. Nothing. The electromagnetic wave system being there, that field being there, the waves being there, different frequencies and certain amplitudes, certain hertz measurements of frequency. As long as all of that is there, nothing happens to the broadcast. So we have to get used to that idea, and when we do, we find creative solutions coming up. And so there's no use in standing and complaining. You can stand there and call up the inside values to suit the various problems. Stand there. You've got everybody who has an inspiration says it came to me, as if a thunderbolt came and hit their forehead. See, we have this peculiar idea that I bless somebody, a dove goes out from the head, from the ears or something and blesses, or I curse something like a bolt of lightning goes out. But this would be a wrong idea. So it's a question of, we're always tuned into the cosmic mind, but we don't explore that necessarily. We don't wait and shuffle around the ideas. So in the ancient days, they had the system. A student comes to a teacher, asks a question that may remove doubts. Instead of the teacher asking the question, the teacher says, well, stand here, watch. You can observe, we can discuss a few things if you like. And then after some while, you can shuffle some ideas around and come up with some original ideas. They won't come from you. They'll come from an area, which is your cosmic broadcasting station. So as the problem comes, it tilts like that. It gets an answer, a spontaneous running thing like that. That's called cosmic vision. And if you want to call it cosmic vision or cosmic poise, you can do that. It's the same thing. We are cosmic beings. This is the necessary revaluation, that all the things that we're taking for granted, all the problems get solved when we look at it in a different way, when we bring in our 20th elephant, and then we'll solve the problem nicely by itself. All the solutions, all the problems that are supplied have their matching solutions, and they're all contained within this one cosmic mind. And that we call the Hiranyagarbha in the Vedantic literature. That's what it's called. If we want to put it poetically, and I often say that, it means that, you see, angels from heaven are sent here, supplied with an earthly car. You're waiting in the lift, waiting for to be called into an earthly car to solve earthly problems and give the blessings to people. Are you not born? No. The machine is born. The thing that is the body is born. And you're not born, you're unborn. The problems are born, and the equipment is recharged every time. And so the recipe comes from within. It's already there in cosmic mind, in this golden womb that is the creator of everything. That we have to be convinced. So when you do that, when you stand outside the problem, as it were, your whole life will be hour by hour, problems of various types faced in this way, like a sports person who's got some inner equipment. And such a person will be deemed, will be a puzzlement to many people. Oh, you did some kind of miracle, you have some kind of mantra, something like that. The person is a miraculous man, he's got some mantra, tantra, magic spell, something like that. But no, he's just poised himself, that's all. The body-mind problem, past, present, future, teacher, all have become some coordinated being instead. So that's the first thing. Now there's one Upanishad called the Mahanarayana Upanishad, and you'll find this subject of Hiranyagarbha mentioned multiple times. And there are a number of mantras which are there that represent its scope. That's our real source for all the recipes. So if you can become familiar with that concept first, then knowing it to be present inside what you call your personal mind, its chapters will change after some time. And as you focus your mind on something, the mind wanderings will be taking this shape. And there's a beautiful, beautiful presentation of the systematic arrival of this so-called world. And we have to understand this order of descent. Everything comes from cosmic mind. And if you're a devotee, you'll call it your personal ideal, your most beloved God. Everything comes from there. And the first movement is what we recited in the meditation. The first movement, sound representation or movement is called Om. And from there comes all these other things that we can call them cosmic angels, we can call them tanmatras, mere elements, all unfolding and combining bit by bit. First will come Akasha, this potential energy. It is to do with all sounds, all vibrations. So this person who said, I cannot meditate, the borehole went off. This was a sound. Surely all sounds are sacred. They come from one source. And you have a matching ear to hear it. What a wonderful thing that is. And so that need not be a distraction. That is a clue that leads you, okay, here's my meditation. Here's a sound. Now I can go with that. So there's nothing that is separate or different from this being. And when it combines and recombines, it's coming from itself. And that recombines into a vast area of kinetic energy and radiation, and then eventually electromagnetism. And then there's you and I to catch it at certain frequencies, specified, designed frequencies, with a complex neurological system that acts as an instrument to interpret a dual Like looking through a telescope at things. We can look at the telescope itself. We don't have to always look through it. And then we can look away from it as well. All of this is presented through the telescope of the mind. Now you see there's another aspect of this. All these tremors, all these crests, taken alone, isolated as a series of corpuscles or wave crests. I don't know if you're interested in physics, but at least this much you have to know. The very, very most reliable foundational physics is a kind of physics that we do not understand. Nobody understands it. Because we cannot grasp the idea that something can be a particular thing and a wave at the same time. And then what we're looking at as a point is a kind of crest of a wave somewhere. And this is, by calculation, the most reliable system, but we still don't know where everything is. We just know that when we apply a certain formula, we know the probability of its arrival in our scene. It's an astonishing thing, but not to the Vedantist. The Vedantist knows these are all combinations of waves that arrive as our scenario. And if you don't like it, change your thinking. And change your thinking means tune your attention into this cosmic mind. Be patient enough to understand some 20th elephant will come at some point. A number of them may come, but I'll find one that suits and fits. This is all divine grace that is flowing. There's another interesting passage which I often quote, the Kathopanishad, and you'll be familiar with it. So having revalued the mind, what do we do to the body? We can revalue the body. And there's a very unusual approach taken in the Upanishads, and the commentator says, this is an unusual approach. You'll find this passage reproduced also in its own way in the Bhagavad Gita. So, Puram ekadasha dwaram ajasya vakra chetasaha anustaya no shochati vimuktaska vimukshati etadvitat. There is a city. What is the city? It's the human body. It has 11 gates. We also brought that in the guided meditation. Who does it belong to, and where are the gates? Well, there are 7 in the head: eyes, nostrils, ears, and so on, mouth. And there's also this peculiar royal entrance at the top of the head. And then there's the navel, and there's the organ of procreation and the organ of evacuation. In total, 11 gates, with all the apparatus of a city. All the highways and byways, the waste disposal units, the transport systems delivering oxygen to the blood or through the blood to the various cells of the body, taking away the waste material, the carbon dioxide, delivering it to the lungs, taking it off to the atmosphere. Story doesn't end there. Beyond the city, all that carbon dioxide gets absorbed. It gets absorbed by plants. Now we have global warming and so on and so forth, maybe an excess of carbon in the atmosphere, or carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide. What will we do? Well, the plants will absorb it. You make sure that the earth is forested well. You make sure that the land that is being desertified, lots of deserts growing, you have a system. Deviate slightly because there's a friend of mine, well, an acquaintance from Zimbabwe called Alan Savory. Well worth looking up. He's a revolutionary. Why? Because he's now looking at something from a different point of view, a revalued position. Nobody ever looked at it like this. What he's saying is, you see what's happened throughout the whole planet of the Earth is wild animals in herds have become less. And wild animals do one thing. They graze, and then they defecate where they're grazing and urinate where they're grazing. They don't want to eat that food, they move on. And as they're doing that, they're trampling up the soil. And of course, they're liable to be predated on. There are lions in the waiting, maybe tigers and so on in the waiting. looking for food. And so there's an arrangement. They have to move on. And there's an ecology. They're also providing food. And they know when one of their kind is caught, they can safely continue grazing. Now, because these herds are depleted, we have to have proxy herds. Now you can do something that is extremely controversial. What you do is you take livestock, cattle, sheep, and you manage them well, and their hooves dig up the soil, and they fertilize the soil as well, and they move on in specially arranged areas, protected areas, so that they cannot be attacked by wild animals like lions and so on, let's say in Africa or elsewhere. And by moving and managing the herds like this, you're able to have fertile land where there's immediately a renewal of foliage. And the more you do that, the more the desertification, because deserts happen when there's none of this churning up of the soil or fertilizing the soil, because all the wild herds have naturally gone. And so they become like deserts, and rain falls. And where does the rain go? It doesn't go into the soil, it runs away and carries the soil with it, and deserts will occur. So if you now have these fertile areas, you can do two things with them. First thing you can do is you can plant crops and provide food. And second, you can make forested areas which catch the carbon. Anyway, you may or may not like this idea. Some like it, some don't. But the point is, what a beautiful arrangement that this carbon has given us. So there's a city designed like that, designed to remove all the waste material away, a garbage system of the city with highways and byways, where every cell of the body is managed in its own right, like a small office, a duplication of the whole thing, all working in a coordinated way. There's an 11-gated city like that. Who does it belong to? It belongs to one who is ajasya vakra chetasha, one whose consciousness is unflickering and who is absolutely unborn. Ajasya, unborn, and one who is avakra, not crooked, not changing. That's an amazing thing. If you take any city, regardless of what it is, it's always buzzing with traffic, with pedestrians, with people. Here is a city like that, called the human body, and inside it, there is one stable thing that is not moving, that is not changing. That is something like an emperor. Some kingly presence being within, all the other things are managed well and run well. And by ruling it, one doesn't grieve. If you recognize this, you won't be unhappy. You won't be sorrowful. You won't go into depression. No grieving will take place. Now, these Upanishads are concerned with two things: relieving your suffering, mainly psychological suffering, removing your psychological difficulties, and secondly, dealing with the question of the mother of all fears, namely mortality. So these two things are always mentioned in the Upanishads: removing your sorrow on the one hand and giving you immortality. We always want immortality. We want to live forever. Ask anyone, any Hollywood star who's invested heavily in the plastics industry. And so, truly, this is that comes out. Now you see the Bhagavad Gita in the 5th chapter also mentions the same thing, mentions it as 9 gates. It leaves 2 things out, the navel and the top of the head, and the 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, mouth, and the anus and the generating organ. All of these are mentioned. And so it's like that. And then, of course, the sagittal suture at the very top of the head. And you can really feel that in meditation. There's a soft spot there. You can feel the vibrancy there. Anyway, The Shankaracharya, the great non-dualistic commentator, he takes this to mean contemplating this. If you contemplate this unborn, unchanging one, where will you contemplate it? Well, you can visualize this as a city, and where will this being be? It'll be in the center of the city, in the administrative part, in the palace, internal palace. Now you can reevaluate things again. Reevaluate the body as a city, belonging to one who rules the city by its presence, not by doing anything, but by its just being present there. And you can then revalue the mind as the sitting room of this entity, the royal throne, inside a throne room, ruling the city, organizing things well. We take all this for granted. You know, when we eat food, we have that prayer derived, taken from the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. We say, in translation, we say that the highest principle that we call Brahman is the offering, Brahman is the food, Brahman is the hand that offers it, and so it goes on. The digestive fire, the ghee that is in there, everything. If you see this Brahman in all actions, you go on to Brahman. Don't think that it is yours. Don't think that you're doing it. Not at all. It is this entity that is there. And this is not encapsulated here and imprisoned, because that same being is the sun in the sky. The same being pervades in the space between the earth and the heaven, the interspace. The same being is on the altar of offering, when you light a fire or make a particular sacrifice. And that being dwells in all people, in all men, in all beings, even subtle beings, in all of these tanmatras, these glories which are there, these combinations of waves, otherwise known as devas, and all of this in water, in the earth, all of this in the mountain, and so on. You can go on. Now you have a whole meditation going on. And not only that, he leads the out-breath upward, he casts inwards the in-breath. It is that tiny, tiny dwarf, as it were, tiny, tiny entity that is seated in the middle. And this, all the elemental forces and angels, if you like, and the graces and the combinations of waves adore. It's not just that they are manifested expressions. So that when we contemplate these things, we're contemplating the glory of the divine automatically. What a wonderful thing. So we get our problems by reducing them to something like a figure of speech, in this case, a city. And so the process is to make them like a figure of speech. We use a figure of speech when we talk to ourselves negatively. Somebody has a conversation with somebody, it starts off with complaining about the weather. So essentially a dialogue of complaint, expecting another exchange of agreement and a complaint from the other side. Half an hour of that will drive you to madness. Your whole mind will be obsessed with all of that. You know, rather think of the highest principle. Why don't you think of God? And we have all the resources around to do it. This is what mantras are for, recitations of mantras, and configuring our speech in a positive way. So we get our problems and we can reduce them to figures of speech, and in the mental waves that are cognized and steered through pictures. Now, whether these took place biologically, that's not the question. It just gives us a clue about it. Whether it's an actual, it's just a clue, it's just a statement, a phrase, a concept. For example, in the famous story that we see in the Bible, Jesus is faced with Martha and Mary, and they tell him that the one you love, whose name is Lazarus, our brother, is actually dying. Why don't you go to him? You can rescue him. Or maybe he's nearly dead, something of that order. And so the idea being that if Jesus was near, within physical range, then death wouldn't take place. So anyway, the brother would be saved if he did that, but the message came and he reacted with a figure of speech. What was the figure of speech? He but sleepeth. That was the figure of speech he used. And when the two sisters sent the news, our brother's going to sleep, do you think anybody would worry very much? No, he himself had to declare it. When tea is ready, clap your hands, he will wake up. Or throw some water on his face, or catch hold of his nostrils and mouth and suffocate him, he'll wake up. No, that's too drastic a thing. He didn't seriously mind it. All he had to do was produce a figure of speech. He but sleepeth, finished. And then the disciples must have been wondering, how does that work? You can imagine the place where they went. They had breakfast and lunch and so on and so forth. And one of the sisters must have cooked, and the other sat and listened, and another probably indifferently looked on. And the familiar family has got a disaster, a calamity going on. The brother is dying. Look at this man, the teacher. He just says, he sleeps. But what was the effect of it? He said, he but sleepeth, and then kept quiet. See, there's something then, they must have suspected something is up his sleeve. He's something like a magician. What's going to happen? He'll do some miracle.
They laughed him to scorn when he said that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And then, imagine now, because the body has been hanging around for some days and starts shaking itself, they must have wondered what's going on here. Maybe they ran away. We don't know any of the details, See, the point is, this way of thinking, using this placeholder phrase, had the effect of mobilizing all these sacred and divine elements, and Lazarus awakes. It's not a miracle. It is simply taking advantage of the fact that he knew the secret of cosmic mind. And if theology is correct, he was cosmic mind, the Word made flesh and dwelling amongst us. And so he simply had to express it. Can we also do it? Yes, of course, because we only have this one mind, and that is this cosmic mind. It's a wonderful story, which we can do that. And we can meditate on that story also and see the importance of it. So we can use creative figure of speech, and when we do that, we make a mental movement. And making the mental movement makes a bodily movement, a physical movement also. So there is a city with all these appendages of a city, gatekeepers, gates, entrances, highways, exits, and all of these things going on within us, reevaluate as a city. Then you see, the important thing is, it is belonging to the unborn, who is not crooked. Now we can extend this image. We are a mini universe. What happens within us is happening in the cosmic realm. So during the meditation also, it occurred to me that, you see, when we talk of the universe as such, now there are some people interested possibly in latest astrophysical research, and there's a James Webb telescope that has gone off. And they're looking into bodies that are suggested to be about at least, maybe 300,000 or 500,000 years.
Light years.
Yeah. Well, light years interpreted by us as years, So, this shouldn't be there. You shouldn't have well-formed galaxies bigger than ones we observe close to home. They shouldn't be there. That means some models will have to go. The lambda, what we call lambda cold dark matter model has to go. And that means that dark matter and all that is in question, and many things are in question. That's not the point. The point is that when we look out, the further we look, we are really seeing the macro version of this 11-gated city. This whole vast universe is God's body. I put in a thought in a poem at some point, a child asks, why is the sky blue? Well, if you want a scientific explanation, the eye is catching short wavelengths and it's becoming blue. But that's not half as satisfactory as saying it is the divine skin of the Lord spread out everywhere throughout the entire universe. What a wonderful vision. And if there's only one cosmic mind, if there's only one energy, then this will have to be true. But we'll have to revalue this. So you are privileged to be the observer, the recipient of a heaven-made city with the ruler of heaven sitting in it. And so where is God? Well, right here. Where? In the city. That's where he is. Where is it, this body? Is it not my body? No. That's for passport purposes only. For spiritual purposes, you have to re-register it as the Lord's temple with 11 gates and commanders inside it. And he's seated there. And because he's seated there, all things are going well. And there's a law connected with this. The dualists apply it in the yoga philosophy and the Sankhya philosophies. The non-dualist also applies as one universal principle that anything that is combined and knitted together having parts is not for its own benefit. It's for the benefit of an independent entity. In this case, this unborn and this unflickering consciousness. So that is there. Whenever we see things made from parts, we should automatically re-register them to another entity. And then, of course, you see, when we revalue things, we have to take into account these three states of consciousness that we have. We're registering everything in terms of this waking state. But when we close the eyes, some other thing comes on, a dream comes on. And when the dream goes away, a peace comes on. Now in that dream state, this is cosmic mind's realm. This is where all the creative ideas come from. And a dreamless sleep, close to home, as it were, is an area of potential where all these 20th elephants can arise, creative solutions to problems. Don't think that genius and inspiration comes as an accident, not at all. It comes from reflecting, shuffling ideas around, contemplating. The greatest compositions of Beethoven is as he was walking, taking notes of inspirations, lest he forget. He hears a sound somewhere. It reminds him of that. He connects it with a theme of beauty or grandeur or whatever it is. And it comes out as amazing, world-shattering music. A person cogitates on an idea. Some person is that, there's no standard view of things when two people are approaching each other at varying speeds or even at the same speed. From one view, it looks as if the other one is going faster and the other one looks as if it's going slower, and it depends on their distance, and this is called relativity, special relativity. There's no fixed time. It depends on the observer. Where are you standing? There's a variation there. And the only way to establish something absolutely fixed would be to say, well, what is the total time-space separation between absorption of light and emission of light and so on? Can we measure this? And if it's the same, it goes to nothing, it goes to zero. Now that's an astonishing thing, because it means that all these photons that we're talking about don't actually exist and there's only one observer. Now, when you revalue something in this way, you can hardly believe it, because the gut is not telling you this. It's telling you that this is solid tables and chairs and a person sitting there, and that the social problems and domestic problems and even work problems and so on and so forth that we have to face every day is something that is terribly serious and terribly real. Instead of understanding, no, this whole life is just a pinnacle, the crest of a wave somewhere. And behind it is the whole deep, deep cosmic mind. And if you have any difficulty just on the surface, you can resort to the whole ocean. We just have to shuffle the ideas around and they will come to us. We have to tune in to our own full mental potential, and there we will find all the 20th elephants that we want in the cosmic mind. All right, so there we are. So I think we will leave it at that for the time being. Supposing we revalue the whole of this world, therefore, as a display of waves, and I've mentioned this almost every talk I give, I emphasize this point, because on the other side of this eternal, this infinite, which seems so out of range for us, is this play. And we start off the cosmic mind, a play of waves comes about and configures and reconfigures as our universe. And we don't bother to trace it all the way back. When we bother to trace it all the way back, then all our problems disappear. And when we treat it like a drama, like a play of waves before us, then our whole attitude changes and our world itself changes and becomes transformed. In that sense, we are masters of our own destiny. We are creators of our own scenarios. Let us make sure that we use this well and tune our mind lovingly into the cosmic mind, and take along all these things with a sportsmanlike or sportswomanlike attitude. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.